ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930 present The Drive.
It is Tuesday, February 21st. I'm your host, Paul Swann. Welcome into The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. If you're new to the show, we're here every weekday, 5 to 6. We will interact with you this hour. Our text line is open, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. I'm also on social media, and the best place to talk to me is always going to be Twitter, and I am available at Paul Swann. So now you know some of the ways you can talk to me. We will get all of your comments in, your tweets, everything you possibly want to talk about, we'll do so today. We start with what I'm going to talk about today, and I've got a couple of things I'm going to get into with you. First of all, I went over to Marshall today to talk to Tony Kemper. He has a presser that is every week, so it's a great opportunity for me to catch up with the head coach of the Thundering Herd, and the women are going to have senior night tomorrow. Marshall is 15-12. Could be better. I think the team agrees it could be better. They're 8-8 in Sun Belt play. Again, that could be better. I think there are several times where the women let one go that Herd more than likely could have and should have won. So we'll talk to Coach here in the next few minutes. We'll also hear from Logan Osburn in a little bit. Logan was part of the well, if you didn't listen to the show yesterday, first thing I'm going to tell you to do is you can go back and listen to that on our podcast, and that's on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. I post the link often on my Twitter account, and just search The Drive with Paul Swann. And while you're there, if you, especially on Apple Podcast, if you would, go ahead and become a follower. That way you get the show at your convenience when it's uploaded. Yesterday, we talked about the fourth quarter program with Ben Ashford. He opened the doors to us, members of the media. We got a chance to go in, just spend an hour with the team. They got to do what they normally do, and the only difference was just they knew we were going to just watch it and be a part of it and take pictures, ask questions. And so Logan Osburn was one of the players we get a chance to talk to yesterday, and I'm going to hear that. And when talking to him, you'll hear this in a few minutes, he actually said that he was scared to death back when he started his first workout. Because when you come from high school, and the thing we learned yesterday from Ben Ashford, who's the director of football performance, is he hears from players all the time, especially guys that come in. If they've been at a bigger school, they've been at a Power 5 school, they come in, and they go through this program, the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden it's, Coach, this is different. This isn't the way it used to be. This is harder than what we were used to. And that's one thing, and he said that yesterday. I'll play it again for you. He said that players pretty much find out that the program is harder than a lot of the P5 schools, and he explains a little bit why that is.
The difference is, when I hear a lot of, is the guys that have transferred from SEC programs, the bigger programs have all said, it wasn't this hard. It was not this tough. So that's a kind of a validating test to what we do. I was trained at the University of Alabama, the originator of the fourth quarter program, Coach Saban. So I like to we take a lot of pride in, we're going to turn it up a notch from what you think, what you've been doing. So, but this is a crucial time for all the newcomers to kind of find where they fit in.
And that was yesterday when we talked to BA. So Logan Osburn, when talking to him, he was like, I was scared to death back when he started doing this, and he's got more into the rhythm now. But imagine not only coming from a Power 5 school to Marshall, and then you go through this program, and you're thinking, wow, this is tougher than it was where I'm from, where I used to be. And then you got someone coming in from high school, first time going through this program, because you don't have anything like this at the high school level. There might be some schools across the country, there might be high school programs that are a little bit more capable of doing something like this, a little bit more flush with resources. There are those programs, but I don't think at this level. So it's going to be a shock to the system for a lot of guys to go through this. And you start to find out more about the character of a player, character going through that adversity. So we'll hear from Logan Osburn in just a few minutes. I look forward to that. We're going to hear from several of the players this week, as we've also got basketball to talk about. The Thundering Herd back in action tomorrow. Not only are the women in action, and that's senior night. If you're looking for a game tomorrow, take your radio with you to the women's game. You can listen to our broadcast of the men, and you can go support Coach Kemper and the Thundering Herd as a senior night at the Cam Henderson Center. So you've got some options there, but we'll hear from Coach Kemper in just a few minutes. But Marshall on the men's side tomorrow taking on James Madison. This is going to be one of those games which will decide where Marshall ultimately will end up. Seeding is important right now. Marshall's trying to stay with Southern Miss and maybe tie Southern Miss and then have the tiebreaker. To do that, you're going to have to win the final two against JMU and then Old Dominion. Both those games are on the road. Southern Miss, if Southern Miss slips up, Marshall can catch Southern Miss and become the regular season champion. Well, what does that mean? Well, first of all, you get a championship. Regular season championship, that's important. It's a sign that your program's doing better. I don't believe the Sun Belt's not as good as Conference USA arguments. Conference USA's having a good go of it right now. I'll give that league a lot of credit. And with FAU having a good go of it right now, I will give them credit. But I think that Marshall's in the right place. Sun Belt, I think it's a strong league. It's going to get better. It might be a little top-heavy with the newcomers, but that's okay. With Marshall, with JMU, with Southern Miss, Old Dominion's in there a little bit, but primarily it's Marshall, JMU, Southern Miss probably leading the way of the newcomers. And so here's an opportunity for Marshall to get back at JMU. I don't think that was the very best game we could see when Marshall played JMU back on New Year's Eve. It was a 72-66 loss at the hands of the Dukes. So the Thundering Herd, I'm sure, would like to get that one back. And to do so, got to go on the road, and that's where the Herd's at right now. I think they left earlier this morning. They were leaving earlier this morning, so hopefully they're going to be well rested and settled in by the time it happens tomorrow. And as a reminder, again, we've got that game for you here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. But the thing that's really stood out to me, Marshall's found the way to win. And especially since that Louisiana game, that was not Marshall's best game. That was not the best brand of Marshall basketball. Now, you could scratch your head a little bit how Marshall lost to Monroe. It was double overtime loss. And the Georgia Southern game, looking at how Georgia Southern played in Huntington, think to myself, okay, I'm not excusing the loss. A loss is a loss here. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but I think Georgia Southern's a better team. Definitely don't want to face Georgia Southern a third time. I think they're a good team. They're a matchup problem for the Thundering Herd. And the fact that Marshall was able to come back and win that game in dramatic fashion says something about this team. Honestly, we've seen this team down before and come back. It's not impossible. Marshall has, for the most part, been able to weather most storms. There's been a slip-up here or there, but yeah, going back to that Georgia Southern game, Marshall was down 11. I was not, and it's easy for me to say, I was there. I didn't leave, but it wasn't one of those situations where I thought, okay, Marshall's really out of this. Because it's 11 points. Down 11 points. It's easy to come back from that, especially if Marshall can get hot shooting. And so I think Marshall's going to have to do that again tomorrow against JMU. And you're going to have good games from both Tavion Kinsey and Andrew Taylor. They are, in the nation, averaging 20 or more points as teammates, 20 or more points per game. Kinsey's averaging a little bit more than Taylor, but it's close, 21.9 compared to 20.1. And Tavion's starting to turn it up, and Andrew Taylor's starting to turn it up. I was over there yesterday just for a few minutes, and Andrew was ahead of film study, out on the court, just shooting them up, practicing before everyone else is out there. And so I think the Thundering Herd, if the team can go in with some momentum in the tournament, winning these next two games, you're going to be the 2 seed. If you win out, you're the 2 seed. If Southern Miss loses and you win out, you're the 1 seed. So there's a lot to play for here. And JMU knows that, and Old Dominion knows that. Marshall has a double bye. It cannot go any further than 4th. So whatever happens this upcoming schedule, Marshall doesn't go anywhere past 4. So right now we're playing for seeding. This is what we're doing. We're playing for seeding here. All the teams are doing it. Southern Miss is playing for seeding, trying to win that regular season crown. And with that, you get the NIT bid as well. Because if something happens, you don't win the conference tournament, and you're the regular season champion, you get the NIT bid. That's something to keep in mind. Automatically get yourself into postseason by winning the regular season crown. You get the NIT, and then you try to build on that and get into the NCAA tournament. That's where we're at right now with this team. And I hope that we get to a point one year that the Sun Belt is better than a one-bid league, because I think the Sun Belt will do fine in, say, the NIT. But I don't know if we're going to see 2 teams. Would Marshall and Southern Miss be able to get into the NCAA tournament? One is an at-large and, of course, the conference tournament bid. And I don't know yet. I mean, you look at the net numbers, but I don't think that's – Marshall's pretty good right now. Marshall's net's pretty good, but I don't know if that's high enough to get the Herd in. I don't know if the net's high enough to get the Herd in an at-large. There's just not enough spots. But if Marshall can win out, maybe Southern Miss falters. You get that regular season automatic bid into the NIT if you win the championship or the regular season crown. Go out and win the Southern Conference. See, there, I've done that again. Go out and win the Sun Belt Conference. You get the NCAA tournament bid. That's what you want. And let's hope that the Herd can do that. But you got to start tonight and make sure that you're all set to go. You're right focus as you're on the road. You're going on to the road for the final time, at least in the regular season, before you head down to Pensacola. So, the Herd hopefully has the right mindset all the way to JMU and then to Old Dominion. And we're going to have those games for you here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Let's hear from Logan Osburn when we continue. Also, we're going to hear from Tony Kemper later on. We'll talk Marshall women's basketball. And, of course, we're going to hear from you. Our text line is 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. If you're out driving about, heading home from work, wherever you're at, love to hear from you. Of course, it's a beautiful day outside for those of you listening live on the radio, and you know what I'm talking about. It's really nice out there today, and I'm hoping that that's going to be the weather we're going to get for a long time to come here over these next few months. So if you're enjoying yourself outside today, I want to hear from you. And if you listen on the podcast, if you listen at another time other than when we're on the air live, you know who you are. You can find me on Twitter at Paul Swann. Love to hear from you wherever you're at, whenever you're listening. More coming up on this edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
We're taking Paul Swann everywhere. Download or subscribe to The Drive with Paul Swann on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Tuesday, February 21st edition, The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. Thanks for being a part of today's program. had a chance to catch up with Logan Osburn yesterday, and it was fun. It was fun. I now believe that every day, and if he would go, he's not a social media guy. He told us this yesterday, but Ben Ashford, if BA would go on social media every single day and just post something motivational, his following would skyrocket. Absolutely. That needs to happen. So if anyone's at Marshall listening to me right now, make that happen. We need a Ben Ashford daily motivational. I don't know. It could be like a 15-second video. You could chop them up, do that. He could do a whole bunch of them once a month and just post them and have them ready to go and just auto post them if you want to. I don't care how you do it. Just produce them, make them really sharp, and just it could be a daily motivational. He could just yell at us, and we want to run through a wall for that guy. So I'm hoping that we get that, because then I'll feel better, and I'll want to go run through a wall. So I don't have Ben Ashford today to motivate me, but I did get a chance to talk to Logan Osburn, and we talked about it earlier in the last segment if you weren't with us, and you can go back and listen to that anytime on our podcast. Logan was kind of scared back when he started his first workout, and when we heard from BA about how players find out, this is not that easy. This is harder than you think. If you're used to one way, be ready to be surprised, because this is going to be a lot more intense. It's going to be ratcheted up a little bit. So Logan talked about that when he was asked yesterday about what it was like his first time around when doing this.
I think my first workout, I was scared to death. I just didn't know what to expect, but now I'm way more comfortable. Love being in here, love training with the guys. So this is a great time.
So now he's into it. It's not scary. It's challenging. I'll say that. Those guys got to go right at it. And the whole point of this is the mentality that's building. You don't win games by showing up for practice. You practice a few times. You look at the film. You study. Okay, you don't necessarily win games that way. It's a big part of it. But the mentality is you start winning games now. When you're working out in the fall, when you're working out in the wintertime, you're working out in the summer. When you're doing these sessions, when you're building yourself up for the upcoming season, you win the game here. Coaches have said that for as long as I can remember. And it's stressed here even more now. And Logan talked about that. Now is when you win games.
Right, you win games right now. You don't. Some people think you win games in August, preparing, but you identify your identity and culture in winter workouts. How tough you're going to be, how physical, how determined you're going to be. You do it right now, and especially O-line, D-line. You got to be strong, physical, and powerful. And right now is really the most critical time of the year.
Got to keep your quarterback upright. Got to keep your running backs able to run, make those holes block, keep your whole system going. Got to get those big boys stronger, right? Up front, especially. So now's when you win games, because you can't get better the way you can during this program when it's game week. Can't just walk in, okay, I'm going to get better. I'm going to go work out, I'm going to get better. No, you got to do that now. And so that's where the mentality comes, is we're doing this now. We're going through this now, because by the time we get to the game is easy. If we do this properly, the game is going to be easy by the time we get to it. But we're also building on some success here. And Logan talked about this, the momentum forward from last season. He admitted seasons past, he's ended the season pretty salty. Not so much now, because you get a bowl victory. You can take that forward into the next season while you work out, trying to get ready for the upcoming opening day.
This is my first bowl game victory. So, every offseason I've gone into kind of like a salty mode, because, we didn't accomplish our goals. But this one is, you could definitely feel the momentum is going to drive into the 2023 season.
So no salty mode. I don't know. I like salty mode sometimes. I'm not going to lie to you. That chip on my shoulder, that salty mode. I like that. I'm going to coin that. I'm going to be in salty mode now. That way, I take it out on things. I'm going to be like Jordan. Always going to be like Jordan. I'm going to invent reasons why just to be mad, so I can find something that will motivate me. Salty mode. So Logan's not in salty mode right now. He actually got to experience a bowl victory, and that's great for him. And something that I asked Ben Ashford yesterday about the importance of this program. Not only is it designed to get these young men physically ready for the demands of the season, to put them in the right mind space, but it's also about building bonds. And Logan Osburn talked a little bit more about that when I asked him his thoughts on the process.
Yeah, you create those bonds right now. You don't create the bonds through hanging out. Really, you create the bonds through blood, sweat, and tears. Coming in here, working, suffering with your brother is what builds those bonds.
So we all suffer together, and we all become friends together. We bond together over a shared adversity, a shared hardship. It's the thing that we have in common. What's the one thing that brings us all together? If you're listening to this show, you're listening for several reasons. One, and this is maybe a poor example of the bonds that the football players go through with adversity like this, but we have common bonds. You tune in, you listen because you like Marshall, you like Marshall athletics. You tune in because I talk about Marshall athletics. You might tune in because you like hearing what I have to say. You like the fact that maybe you can talk to me and I'll interact with you. We have some things that are common together, but these guys, they might not have common things. They go to Marshall, they play for Marshall. Okay, that's the bond there. But you put them in a situation where there's a lot of adversity, and they start to bond further because they grow as a unit. They get through it together, and so that's where the bonds begin. And hopefully this program will continue to do that and develop a lot of chemistry for these guys as they get ready for the upcoming season. So that's Logan Osburn. We'll hear more throughout the week. Again, it was a fun experience getting the chance to go in and see exactly a little bit more detailed. And I know you might be thinking, okay, look, they're lifting weights. They're, what's so transformative about that? What's the big deal? It's how they go about it, what they're being asked to do, how they react to the situations, and the guy in charge. It starts there. Just spending time with him, seeing how he handles his business, how he handles it, the motivational speech he gave. And it really wasn't one of those, here's Coach with a motivational speech. It wasn't anything like that. It was something you could really take home. I mean, he was talking about not necessarily, so you can lift a lot of weight, but that's not necessarily what we're trying to do. We're trying to get you to, be better, to do it mechanically sound. We're trying to, we're not trying to, so big deal. You were able to lift this big amount of weight one time, but hey, how can you do it in real situations? How's that translate to real situations? Well, you're going to have to be able to do it correctly over a longer period of time. So you might not be able to lift or push the big weight around multiple times, but if you're doing it correctly, you can push a lot more than you think. And so he translated that a little bit to life as well. He said, I believe, I'm not misquoting him, trying to be 1 inch better than you were yesterday. And I think we can take that to heart and try to be 1 inch better than we were yesterday. So that's our goal here on the show with you and, of course, with the Thundering Herd. When we come back, I want to hear from you. Our text line is 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. I know you're enjoying the beautiful weather outside if you're listening to us live, so thanks for taking us with us. Wherever you're at. If you're out in the car right now, you're on your way home from work, it's a beautiful day. Thanks for taking us with you. And we're going to hear from Tony Kemper when we continue on this edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
We continue on with this edition of The Drive for Tuesday, February 21st. I'm your host, Paul Swann, on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Basketball action returning tomorrow. The Midland action on the road, taking on JMU, 7 o'clock tip. We have the game for you beginning at 6 o'clock with our pregame coverage here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. We also will do that on 93.7 The Dog. The women will be in action tomorrow, taking on, this is going to be a tough one here for the Thundering Herd, because this week the women on senior night will face off against Old Dominion. And so it's going to be, I think, a challenge for the women. Right now, Marshall, 8-8 on the women's side, 15-12 overall. And so it's senior night. You're also trying to bounce back. You didn't have a successful road trip. So I think that's the focus this week. And I don't know if it's really we have to bounce back focus. It's the Herd knows if you want to have a good run in the tournament, you're going to have to go with a little momentum and put it all together. And so that's where we begin with Tony Kemper from earlier today, talking about this team. And he knows that this team's got to bounce back, and how the team responds is how we'll see if they're able to this week.
Yeah, so obviously we have a big week that we're trying to bounce back and hopefully find some more success than we did last week. We had a tough trip to Georgia. I think anytime when you lose 2 games on the same road trip by 3 points, 1 possession, that's tough. And so. I think we, as a team and a staff, we're trying to stay level-headed. You're right there, and you need one more shot to go in either game, and you win. And so you don't feel very good on that airplane. And at the same time, I think, I thought we had a good day yesterday as far as bouncing back and maybe kind of coming up off the floor a little bit, because it wasn't a good feeling on Saturday.
So the challenge this week starts with Old Dominion. Old Dominion, not a team to take lightly. It's a good squad coming into the Henderson Center. It's senior day for the Thundering Herd. So you'll have 3 seniors honored. But the important thing here is you have 2, as Coach Kemper called them, 2 tremendous opponents to deal with this week.
2 tremendous opponents this week in Old Dominion here at home for senior night, and then finish the season at James Madison. 2 teams that are fighting at the top of the standings, and so both games will be difficult and I think hard fought, and we saw that in the first round against both these teams, and so we'll have to peak at the time you want to peak, and I guess we've got about a week to do it.
And you have 2 games left, and you have the tournament. So the question I asked Coach Kemper, I asked this the other day too while I was on his post-game Zoom from the road trip, is about the urgency. Are you feeling it? Are you seeing it? Is it there with the fact that now you're down to 2 games left of the regular season? Then you have to contend with going on the road to the tournament. New venue, you haven't been there before as a team. You're not familiar with how that's going to go down in the Sun Belt tournament. So you're the new kid still. And so with the fact that you're running out of games, 2 more regular season games, and then you have 1 bonus game, a tournament game, and it could be it after that. So Coach talked a little bit about where they're at, how they're close. He did bring up that the team was inconsistent, so I don't think there's any urgency from the standpoint of, we better figure this out. We better figure this out. Yeah, that makes sense to you? I'll let Coach explain.
I think that we're going to see that probably, honestly, and how really we bounce back from what happened last week. I still think when you look at, I've been preaching the same thing, and that's consistency. And when we are consistent, we're pretty good. When you live through the ups and downs, then we're not as good. And I think last week in Georgia, we were a little too inconsistent.
So it's not a situation where this team is just lost looking for an identity still. You got to be consistent. We've seen this team be able to battle back. We've seen this team be able to win games. This isn't going to be an easy out for any team in the Sun Belt tournament. This is not an easy out here. Not going to roll Marshall. That's the good thing. I don't think anyone's going to roll Marshall. We'll find out, though. Because according to Coach, talking to him today, he's confident. He feels good. He's not overconfident. I didn't pick that up. What it was, though, is he likes his team. He says his team is playing at a high level.
I think they're playing at a pretty high level when you talk about what we tried to do from the start, which is build a team that can compete right away with everybody and really returning no one that was in that role, especially after Cece got hurt. So we weren't young because of players like Kendall, Kia, Shania, but we were young together. And so I think, has it been difficult maybe to just get them all together and just consistently play at our top end? That's been our thing. But you see it every time we play. Like, if we can just hang out in that top end more often, then they're pretty good. And that's what we're trying to get done on the way into Pensacola. And I think this week, you just look at quality opponents. I think we could play really well, and they're still tough games. That's what I would expect, is we've got to play well to make them tough. And I think the two opponents that we play are probably thinking the same thing, that they've got to play well.
Tony Kemper, his thoughts on the upcoming week. The Thundering Herd, a week away from Sun Belt tournament play. And as an aside, we're going to have that game for you here. I don't have the time just yet. Yeah, it's not 100% locked in, but I think Marshall's going to be in that 8-9 seed range, and so that's going to be an afternoon game. We'll have it here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. When we continue, time for you to be a part of the program. Text line is 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. It's The Drive, ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
You don't have to go to Washington, D.C. to enjoy the President's Day sale. Come to Scioto Shoe Mart for a large selection of women's and casual and dress shoes starting at $10 and up. Assorted men's casual and dress shoes now $20 and up. Women's casual and dress boots now 30% off the regular price. Some exclusions apply. Assorted athletic shoes for men and women starting at $30 and up. Assorted kids athletic shoes starting at $10 and up. During the President's Day sale at Scioto Shoe Mart, 615 Harding Avenue, Sciotoville.
Our Kindred Communications family of stations reminds you of the need for blood donations to the Red Cross. Blood is always needed. It may save your life or the life of a loved one. This reminder is brought to you in part by
Cremeen King Funeral Home of Racine, Gallup East, and Pomeroy, Ohio. Here to assist you in your time of need. Ohio Valley Bank, Community First, member FDIC. Visit online at ovbc.com. Daily Tire, 740-446-8473. Online at dailytire.com and on Facebook for specials.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Our text line is open at 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. I want to welcome you back to today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. We've got a time. Well, I'm sorry, not a time. We've got a date. We got a date with the Marshall ECU game. You know, the American putting out all the schedules today. I don't know if you saw that, but the Marshall ECU game has been scheduled for September 9th, 2023. You excited for that one? I think I am. If there was a reason for Marshall to be in the American, of course, monetarily, that's always a reason. But I think Marshall ECU, that's always a reason for me. Unfortunately, ECU is not going to come to the Sun Belt. And I don't think Marshall needs to take a look at the American. Not anytime soon. I like Marshall's place right now in the conference world, the alignment. I'm happy with it. And so the best way for these two teams to meet are in games like this. So I'm happy that these two teams are back on the schedule with each other. It's a great series. I like the fans. I've always liked the ECU fans. Those fans travel well. They're gracious host when Marshall travels. There's a shared bond. And it's not necessarily just the old fans, the older fans that remember the connection. I think a lot of the younger ECU fans get it as well, the connection between the two teams. I mean, here this is the last team that Marshall faced, that these young men faced before that tragic, fatal night. And, that sticks with you, especially if you were there. So it's good to see those bonds continue. So there you have it. And, of course, there's a football game to be played. I'm looking forward to it between the Herd and the Pirates. Should always find a way to get ECU on the schedule and more than just football. Marshall, ECU, and basketball. I'd like to see that more often. Wouldn't you? Definitely would like to see that. And of course, I would make sure to play all the big schools you possibly can in the area. That means I'd like to see more of the Virginia schools if possible. Outside of the conference, I would like to see, and you see this in some sports, but I definitely want to see, any opportunity you can get with Virginia Tech, Virginia, obviously those are must-haves. But ECU, I think, is top of the list for me to have on the schedule, as far as must-haves in the area, not just from Virginia, but from North Carolina, just, schools that are in those immediate areas. You can bus to, you can drive to. That's the thing. Get in the car and go. Some destinations a little further, but still, you can get in the car and go. That's what I like about this conference a little bit better. Is we've seen some Herd fans really travel. Absolutely, have seen some Herd fans travel. Texas State, Arkansas State, we saw some Herd fans there. And, of course, Georgia, that's an easy one, right? Louisiana, who would pass up a trip to go to Louisiana? Coastal Carolina is an easy one. Georgia State's really an easy one. And now JMU and Old Dominion. Midweek games, both of them. Friday game with Old Dominion, but JMU is a midweek game. I'm okay with it. I might be the only one here among us that likes the Wednesday, Friday of this. I like the Wednesday, Friday. You get the Wednesday game. I wouldn't do things like playing Sunday, but okay. Let's play on weeknights where it might not be as crowded on the television landscape, or in college basketball, it might not be as crowded there. So Friday night, you got Herd Hoops. I like that. I'm good with that. I don't think you can necessarily do that for football, play a lot of Fridays. You could, but for basketball, Friday night college basketball action, okay, I'm here for that. Sign me up for that. I think that would be something to look at in the future. And, of course, I don't know still at this point if I like the 4-game road trip, the cluster of games. And it's not one continuous road trip, but you had 3 home games, and then you have 4 road games in a row. And it was interesting. You start with App State and JMU. Then you have Georgia Southern on the road, and then you play host to 3 more games until you get into the rotation, road, home, then the big 4-game road chunk. I mean, it might work itself out a little bit more, but I don't know if I like that. But I do like the Wednesday, Friday. And again, I might be the only one among us here. What say you? We'll keep the text line open. I'll catch up with those tomorrow, but you can text anytime at 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. You can also find me on Twitter at Paul Swann. And if you listen to the show and it's on the podcast, you can always find me there and try to express yourself that way. If that's an easy way to go ahead and try to be a part of the show on a delay basis, use Twitter. And of course, we'll read text every single day, and keep that number programmed in, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. So tomorrow, pregame coverage begins at 6 o'clock with Marshall and JMU. The game of the night. We'll be back here starting at 5:06 on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. So we'll take you all the way to tomorrow's game, and then right back here afterwards with our post-game show. We'll have coach's reaction to the game. Hopefully we'll have player interviews as well. And, of course, we will have your text and phone call. So we'll do all that tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in for today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.